Good morning, and welcome to the Ericka Redic Show. On town meeting day, March 2nd, voters in 20 Vermont cities and towns will decide whether to allow retail marijuana. The current state law says local voter approval is needed before a marijuana store can open. But what about towns that don't want to vote on retail pot? The banner scrolling on your screens shows you which towns will or will not have the item on the ballot in March 2021. Concerns about big cannabis steamrolling local interests were dismissed with promises that retail marijuana would be done on a small, friendly, diversity-sensitive scale. Skeptics were assured it would be done the Vermont way. Without the promise of local control, S54 would not have passed. The question now is whether anyone ought to be surprised that the marijuana industry and some senators are trying to change the agreement. Senate Bill 25 wants to limit the window of a locality's decision to accept retail cannabis to just the next 13 months. If by next March 2022, a town hasn't put the question to voters, they'll never be able to do so again. This rush to have towns decide concerned lawmaker Art Peterson of Clarendon. He is the lead sponsor of Bill H-164, and he's joining us today to discuss the bill. Representative Peterson, thank you for coming on the show.
Well, thank you for having me, Ericka. It's a pleasure.
So tell us, what does H-164 propose to do?
Ericka, H-164 proposes to make the integrated portion of the cannabis industry, that is cultivation or growing, warehousing, product manufacturing, and product testing, also subject to opt-in by towns. So towns will have to opt in order to have those industries in their town. That builds on and gives more local control to the towns in our state.
So what was your motivation for proposing this bill?
Well, I had worked for years with SAM Vermont, that's Smart Approaches to Marijuana with in Vermont. And working with them, we tried to work to keep the marijuana industry out, but now it's law. Act 64 makes it law. My bill 164 builds on that, and we just feel that I just felt like towns need more local control, not just over retail, but over the growing, testing, and manufacturing of these products. These things affect property values in our town. They affect the environment in our town, and I felt it was important we have that control.
Do you have any idea why the Senate is pushing this shortened time frame?
I really don't, Ericka. It sounds like a mandate to me, and local control is all about not having mandates. It's about giving towns and townspeople the choice of how their town is to be operated.
And well, isn't that novel that locals should get to decide?
Yes, and I feel that the cannabis industry is one that townspeople ought to have a say. I mean, this issue has been in front of taxpayers for an awful long time. There's a lot of people with strong opinions against as well as for it. And if we're going to dedicate our land, dedicate our resources to the cannabis industry, I feel that townspeople need to have a say in that.
Is there anything else, any other bills that you're aware of that are coming down the pipeline through the legislature that Vermonters should be made aware of?
Yes, I have a bill that's being written up now that will make it mandatory for marijuana products to have a warning label on it, similar to the tobacco industry and the alcohol industry.
So they don't already have those warning labels on them?
From what I understand, they do not. And it was felt that these types of warnings about the various proven problems with smoking marijuana need to be on their products as well as the other intoxicants.
That sounds like pretty pretty smart decision making. Thank you, Representative Peterson, for coming on.
You're very welcome. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
And there you have it. Representative Peterson says H-164 is full strength, unadulterated local control. No vote equals no retail, no cultivation, no growing, no marijuana. The bill has no deadline or even a requirement to vote. And that doesn't sit well with S-25 co-sponsor and Caledonia County Republican Joe Benning. Senator Benning, who's involved in many controversial bills this year, says towns have had plenty of time to consider retail marijuana. Here's what he told Vermont Daily this week. As for whether towns have had enough time, this issue has been out there for over 5 years, probably more, Benning said. I would argue that any such suggestion that we need more time at this point is really just an attempt to avoid having to deal with it. In the meantime, with cannabis now legal, underground sales markets that threaten to release to our kids more harmful substances are thriving due to legally approved retail sites being unavailable. What some are perceiving as a bait and switch has opponents of retail cannabis suggesting that towns should vote now, before powerful commercial interests use their marketing and advertising dollars to persuade Vermonters there's nothing to be concerned about. Dr. Catherine Antley of Physicians, Families, and Friends told this to Vermont Daily. The data on the outcomes related to marijuana outlet density is clear. Where there is more commercial marijuana, use rates are higher, and youth use rates are higher. She continued, commercializers have a financial interest in minimizing the perception of harm caused by products they promote and sell. Given a year, their marketing resources will be spent on casting doubt on marijuana's harms. Stories from people suffering negative effects of pot are often dismissed as reefer madness. Yet even the Boston Globe had a front-page story describing scromiting. That is a really weird word to say, but it is the unexpected screaming and uncontrolled vomiting that happens to marijuana users who aren't used to consuming highly concentrated THC commercial products. The article also detailed the corruption and bribery rampant of public officials by marijuana companies. In 2019, when S-54 was being considered, Governor Scott, like many others, was asked if he was aware of the growing incidence of scromiting and bribery in Massachusetts. He, like many others, was not. There is a lot to consider when lawmakers sit down to craft legislation. This host wonders how many of them stop to consider that their actual role is to protect our constitutional rights, rather than make personal decisions for us. So I would like to go on record as saying I am a fence sitter at this time when it comes to retail marijuana. I'm sure that surprises anyone that knows me, given that I have an opinion about pretty much everything. So much so that my friends even made me a pin for my superhero archetype, the judger. But here's what I'm not on the fence about: telling people the truth about the risks and benefits of taking part in something, in taking part in anything. This is what is called informed consent. The narrative that pot is fine and there are no consequences for consuming it is a lie, as is the lie that there are no legitimate benefits for pot. Just like every drug, there are pluses and there are minuses. Some people can take antidepressants and it relieves their depression, while some others take the same drug and it drives them to suicide. As Vermonters, we must be willing to have reasonable conversations about what is true and what is not, rather than what we wish to be so. Thank you, and we'll see you next week.